I will begin recording, and we'll start with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu
Olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
So we left off last week. We were reading Levine's commentary about cherem. When you put property into cherem, and this was an unusual and difficult to understand concept of what cherem meant, and I mentioned that it's one of the verbs that is used in the Kol Nidre prayer, but from the root meaning to set apart, to denote, to restrict. And as I was reviewing it this morning, I was thinking, it kind of feels like we're all in cherem right now. Matthew says there's nothing in the chat, so let me put it up there again. I think what happens is if you join the conversation after we have begun, then you don't see the chat. Like my
No, it's coming up.
I
have it.
Actually needed download time.
It's okay.
I got it. I downloaded it.
Yeah, me
Okay.
too.
Great.
I don't have it.
So for those who are I'm putting it up again. So those who are just joining, I'm giving you a preview of the handouts for Genesis chapter 1 so that you can start telling me that you don't have it and you can't find it. Where is it? So we're talking about cherem, putting property in cherem, and I was saying, in a way, it feels like we're all in a place of cherem right now. If you think about it as being isolated, restricted, cut off from the community, which really is the essential sense of cherem. Levine's summary statement is, one has the impression that there is a background to this law that is unknown to us, since it diverges decidedly from the norms applicable to the institution of cherem as they are known from other biblical sources. So essentially, he comforts us about the fact that we don't really fully understand what's being discussed here. And we read various options. So any final thoughts on cherem before we move forward with verse 30?
It basically means in God's possession, right? In God's hands.
That's a good way to put it, Felix. I like that. Because that's kind of generic. Both, it's a great way of capturing it, Felix, because it captures both that idea of a punishment of cherem, which is traditionally understood as you're gonna get it, but not by human agency. And it also captures that sense of property that is dedicated to the sanctuary that's put in cherem. So what did you say, in God's hands?
In God's possession or in God's hands.
Okay, I'm going to just write that down because I like that. And I'll attribute it to you in my note here, Felix. In God's...
I think I got it from you, so.
Oh.
Not much.
Okay. Yeah, okay, good. Well, if I said it, thanks for reminding us. Final thoughts on cherem. Oh, David, you put it as a Google Doc?
I tried to, but I think I fouled it up.
Okay, well, whatever. So there we are. So who would like the honor of reading the last 4 verses of Leviticus?
Starting at where? 29?
Yes.
Starting on 29?
You can start at 29 or 30.
I see 30.
There you go.
All tithes from the land, whether seed from the ground or fruit from the tree, are the Lord's. They are holy to the Lord. If anyone wishes to redeem any of his tithes, he must add 1/5 to them. All tithes of the herd or flock, of all that passes under the shepherd's staff, every 10th one shall be holy to the Lord. He must not look out for good as against bad, or make substitutions for it. If he does make substitution for it, then it and its substitute shall both be holy. It cannot be redeemed. These are the commandments that the Lord gave Moses for the Israelite people on Mount Sinai.
All right, let's all say together. Chazak,
Chazak,
chazak. All right, beautiful. So not much new material in those final verses. I wanted to just read what the Eitz Chaim has to say very briefly. The opening verse of chapter 25 reads, "The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai." Both at the beginning and at the end of major section or books of the Torah, it was customary to state where and when the revelation from God had occurred. So there's kind of a postscript here. The Eitz Chaim also says, not all the laws, however, were literally given to Moses at Sinai. The opening verse of Leviticus describes the laws that follow as having been given at the tent of meeting. Sinai is not a geographic location. It is a symbol of Israel's awareness of having stood in the presence of God and having come to understand what God requires of them. Whenever a person hears the commanding voice of God himself or herself to live by that voice, that person can be considered to be standing at Sinai. The greatest single event in the history of God's revelation took place at Sinai, but was not limited to it. God's communication continued in the teachings of the prophets and the biblical sages, and in the activities of the rabbis of the Talmud. It remains alive in the codes and responsive to the present day. Now, remembering that the Eitz Chaim is a conservative commentary, that is actually a very radical statement, because it tells us that revelation is ongoing, that we continue to have standing to interpret the word of God, and that when we are making those interpretations, we can be said to be standing at Sinai. So that is not a universally accepted premise, and it puts a lot of authority into our own hands, contrary to the traditional halachic understanding that really limits our power to interpret, read, interpret, adapt, and apply the Torah based on our understanding of it. The traditional understanding is like, who are we to be adding to, changing, evolving the words of the Torah? There's no way the traditional mind says that those of us in 2020 could possibly have the kind of knowledge and authority that our ancestors did. And contrary to that, Mordechai Kaplan famously said, the tradition has a vote, but not a veto. So we look to the tradition for guidance, but no, we do arrogate to ourselves the right to make changes. And this is why we look at the Torah, we see things in there that we study and we understand, we try to appreciate them in context, but we say, you know what, we have moved beyond that, and we have the right and the authority to make those changes. So not, again, to be taken for granted. Other thoughts about those final verses of Leviticus before we open up our aperture and take a bigger look? Yes, Terry.
The 10th, the no substitution clause for the 10th one, that's a fascinating little piece for me. And I noticed that Levine has a comment about it too.
Oh, okay. You want to read us, Levine?
Well, it was, he must not look out for the good as against the bad. He's just clarifying that the very animal is pre-assigned as of the moment of its designation as the 10th. And then from then on, you're just stuck with whatever it was. So if number 10 is your best one, goodbye, kiss it goodbye. And if it's your worst one or somewhere in the middle. Everybody else will have to live with that. But I guess the idea that they're cutting off the options of someone who says, oh, wait, that one's too good. I can't give that one away.
Right.
I have to wait, take this one instead. And then it reminds me of all the bait and switch and, you know, a lot of other kinds of things that have grown out of that.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's a very specific, very exact, doesn't allow for a lot of input from the person who's making the offering.
No, but I mean, I don't know how they chose the first 9, but when you've chosen 9 and then it comes to the 10th.
Gosh, I assumed that it was birth order.
Actually, Stone has an interesting comment in here, Rabbi. Yeah. Stone says, the newborn herd or flock is put into a corral with a narrow opening, and the animals are allowed to leave one by one. The owner or his designee touches each 10th one with a paint daubed stick, making it as Massar or the tithe. So it's sort of like, quick, push that runt over here to be the 10th.
Yeah.
Make it
But
yeah,
Barry, that is exactly how shepherds make a count. As the sheep come through, every 10th one, some sort of creosote is applied to the back of the 10th one so they can keep a quick count, how many they count of the markings, so they know how many are on the flocks that's on the pasture lands.
and this comment is attributed to Rashi.
Okay, which would make sense because France was sheep, goats, cattle, so.
I'm just looking to see, I don't know if anyone saw, someone sent me, you know, some beautiful photos this week in an email, and one of them was an aerial photo of a flock of sheep going through a gate.
Oh.
And it was fabulous. And it's this, you know, expanse of sheep, you know, just narrowing down and taken from an aerial perspective. I'm going to see if I can put my fingers on it.
No one is standing there with paint on it, huh?
Look under Joel Sherman.
Yeah.
Or Myra.
Oh, here it is. Let me see how I can get that to myself. Okay, let me just keep talking. I'll put, I got to move it around a little bit to a place where I can get it.
I don't remember the last time anyone sent me a picture of sheep.
Really? You're hanging out with the wrong people.
Clearly, you don't have friends from New Zealand. Send them all the time.
Or New Jersey. Gary. Bah.
Oh.
No, it was fun up in Utah. We had friends that were part of the sheepdog, the little black and white dogs, Australian shepherds, and they would have those dogs run sheep from 500 yards up downhill through some gates, then run another bunch down, and they would guide the sheep through a series of gates. And the shepherd, once 10 were through, would close the gate, another 10 would put through, and that's how they would mark, and the dogs would run the sheep through, and the shepherd could keep count of what they had on the pasture lands.
So just take a minute and click on that link that I just posted.
That photo is
Yeah,
awesome.
wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome.
It looks positively
Wow.
liquid.
Whoa.
Isn't that fabulous?
That is
Wow.
Question, is there fencing? Oh, yeah, I can see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Like wiring or something.
Yeah.
Real thin.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an incredible number of sheep too, and you had no idea of counting it, of course.
How do you get that?
So other comments on these final verses of Leviticus?
Hallelujah.
Seriously, I'm closing quick.
How many years was this?
Too many.
We've been talking about it, I think maybe 4 years.
Probably, because I know I started about 2.5 years ago, and it was Leviticus back then.
Yeah, I know that when we first started it, I told Rabbi Mari that I thought it would be about 3 or 4 months.
He told us that too, and we all laughed. Little did you know what you were getting into.
Right. So I'd like to give each person an opportunity to react to any big takeaways, lessons learned, surprises about studying Leviticus. Felix, and then Barry Kipnis. We'll give everybody a turn. You know what? Maybe I'll just go across my board and see. Just bearing in mind, we want to give everybody an opportunity to react. So, maybe 2 minutes a piece or so. Merle, you are the first one up. Merle, what Leviticus? What's your elevator speech about Leviticus?
I'm just really glad that we did this, because there's a lot of stuff that, you would read, you would study, you would hear, at a bar about mitzvah or Shabbat services or whatever. And it never, until you study it in a group and really analyze it, you don't get it. It's not something you can just read yourself and say, oh, I get that. You have to flush it out. And I think we did an adequate job of that.
All right,
Flushing it out.
Barry Kipnis.
I loved it. I actually enjoy Leviticus. There's a lot of favorite parts of the Torah are for me. Certainly the Jubilee discussions, all the financial machinations that are discussed, I find fascinating. I think the highlight for me was when we were discussing leprosy, and you brought in, I forgot her name, Becca, what's her name?
Debbie Mendelson.
Debbie Mendelson, who's a dermatologist. And it was absolutely fabulous getting a medical perspective of leprosy, and the discussions we had about it, and the conclusions we came to, that the one that is overriding for me right now is that a rash could be a rash and could have been caused by stress in terms of people violating community norms, and how significant it was in those days to maintain community norms and to avoid stressing the community. I'm done. Okay.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yes, Dr. Solomon.
My main takeaway from Leviticus is that it reminds me that it's not enough to love God, but that we also have to fear God, because it is in all of us to have the potential to do bad things and disrespectful things. And we need to have that fear to help us with that loving God is just not enough.
Fascinating. Barry Singer.
Well, first of all, I went to look back, and when we ended the first time, you asked us to speak at services, and I was going to be away, so I actually wrote it and sent it in. So that was in October of 2014. So it's been about 6 years for this, which means we've got 30 years to go.
Wow.
So, because I remember doing that, and
Yeah, that was, I still have all those documents people sent too.
Yeah, it's the attention to detail that's here. It's sometimes it's mind-numbing, but just the fact that, divinely inspired, who wrote, and all that stuff, I don't even call it controversy, says to me that people thought this through. And they were thinking through these details, and that that mattered. It mattered to think about it, that it wasn't just survival and to a nod to Becca, community. It was, how do we do this? They'd be better managing the pandemic right now than what's been going on here, that's for sure.
Marcy?
Something that was said a long time ago, before we ever got to Leviticus, that struck me as we were reading it, that we have laws because we need them. And this is an entire really, really specific, like Barry said, very detailed book of laws that obviously the community at the time needed to have set down so that they could be a coherent community and not go into chaos, not pick up idolatry or all the other stuff we've talked about. And like Barry said, how really specific everything got. It was just amazing. I could never have read this by myself, like Merle said.
Yeah.
I think that's everything. I made some notes. I think that's it.
Thanks. Sarah Lee?
I feel very, very strongly that all this discussion was something, even though it was written so many years ago, it brought us all together to bring other things within our life to light, that we could use something that was written so far away and so long ago that it can guide us today, that it was almost prophetic in what it was writing.
That's so interesting, and I think we'll see that even more so when we get to Genesis, which is so focused on human relationships.
Mm-hmm.
John and Leanna. Oh, we're not hearing you. Yeah, okay. See what you can do with the volume, and we'll wave when you think you've got it. Terry Berman?
This one is really hard. I mean, I think all the comments that have been made are excellent in terms of takeaways. I think the overall impact on me is the sophistication that we don't usually think of as being present 2,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago when this might have been put down. Considering how much the world has changed and what we know now, that we read this and still find something, not just a little something, but a lot something about how our communities are organized today, how we raise money, the practical, I think that's the word, the practicality of Leviticus is the striking feature to me.
Excellent. Owen?
I think that this is for me an example of the concept of subsuming, where God kind of pulls back, because these are human beings figuring out how to expand upon the work that has already been done. And I think that the notion that tradition is not static, it is dynamic. And I think that that's really the end part of Leviticus, for me, proves that God's giving us the responsibility to do the right thing and to work as a community and to figure out how to survive and be just. And that it's not because of the pillar of smoke or the pillar of fire, it's because of what's in our heads, our ability to think about things. And this is as good an example of that as I think I've seen so far, and I love the whole part of it, all of this.
Nice. John and Leanna, do we think we have, no, not yet? Huh. So make sure the volume is turned on your computer. That's what I often find when people can't hear me, that I have the volume.
Or the speakers turned on. They can always type what they want to say in the chat.
That's true. You can always type something to us in the chat. Willa?
Well, I must admit I did not do my homework this week. I think about it all week. But I think that the need for rules is so important, because when we have rules, we have, it keeps us from, well, it's like when you're at the Grand Canyon, the fact that there's a fence there keeps you from falling over. It makes you feel more secure. However, in reading it, I have a lot of problems with my concept of God. So that came into it to me personally. Also, the application to today, such as all of the conversation about from our CPA and other things that apply to today. How do we fund the synagogue? It's right there.
Right. I'm thinking too about, the whole social justice aspect and accumulation of wealth and redistribution of wealth. That was also highly relevant when you think about contemporary applications.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Oh gosh, I guess several things. It amazes me that there's such importance to making time for the sacred. No matter what that is, that we make time for the sacred. And I guess too, what power these these words have retained across the millennia. Even though things have changed, and I think God is the God of change, these words still hold power for us. So I think those are the takeaways for me.
Beautiful. So Roz, I know you've only been with us for a week or two. I'm hoping it's meaningful to you to hear what this experience has been like for, I guess, 6 years studying Leviticus. Is there anything you want to say just as a kind of an outside newbie?
Sure. Yeah, as you said, Rabbi, I've only been here for 3 weeks or so. And so it's been the fields and the animals. And to me, Torah is the stories that I learned as a child. And I'm still adjusting to the fact that they didn't happen necessarily, that they're, stories that help us learn about ourselves and about what life is like. And so to find in the last few chapters that there's all this minutia of details of things to do rather than destruction of the temple is, to me, eye-opening.
Yeah. It's gratifying to me to hear you talk about the Bible stories that you grew up with. And one of the things that makes me really sad is that I don't think that young people today have that. It really surprises me. If you grab a teenager in our congregation and ask them about Samson and Delilah or David and Goliath, I'm not sure that those would be familiar stories. And
that's kind of sad. I mean, I know it was all Genesis, but we had a blast with those, and the kings and all that.
Right.
The children's Bible.
Yeah. I had a comic book as a kid. That's where I learned the beginnings of it.
Pictures.
Yeah.
Right.
And, it's another topic that I think about a lot, and maybe other people do also. If God could cause the flood with Noah and the plagues with Moses, what's going on today, floods and plague and all that, is it nature? Is it God angry at us? I mean, those are the things that I think about.
Yeah. Sherry?
Well, I've only been with this group since we went on Zoom, so I didn't have the 6 years of history. I only have about 5 months. But with that said, I will say I was quite taken by how this people who had just been freed from slavery needed the prescription of how to be a people, how to be a community. And Leviticus is literally setting the parameters to be a community, not, of your own accord, not of a Pharaoh's accord or a master's accord. So that really struck me over the last couple of weeks.
Nice. David?
Studying with this group is different than doing with Chavruta. There's a lot more opinions, and I really appreciate it. About finances, and that made a lot more sense. Leviticus to me has always been the afterthought that was tacked on to run the place. Who a priest could marry, who he couldn't, who was this, who was that. This was all thought out, and the way things are phrased, for me, strikes me of a leadership fighting among itself, saying, what do we want, what do this, what do we do that? And they finally make a presentation, and this is how to run the organization. Genesis was, let's found a synagogue. Numbers, let's try to find a place. And everyone was just finding it. Finally, we got a place, we got a leadership. How are we going to run this day to day? And Leviticus sounds like, to me, an organization, either of priests or rabbis, Pharisees, Sadducees, or CEOs trying to put, how do we keep the Jewish people running when we have a king, when we don't have a king? What are our basic values, and how do we fund it? So this has been fascinating.
Yeah, so if you, the commentary that we read right when we began from the Eitz Chaim does cite the fact that Leviticus is called Vayikra, but its formal name is Torat Kohanim, the Torah of the priests. And that's a Talmudic reference. I can give you the reference right here in the chat if you want to look it up. In the Mishnah. So Torah, so you're exactly right. It's the Torah of the priests. It was the manual of instruction for the priest's operation that got tacked into the Torah that was more generic for the people. Sherry?
Why then is it the third book as opposed to the last book? How did that?
The last book is Moses' valedictory statement.
Right.
So Moses gets the last word.
My personal favorite.
Devarim?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Beth.
I'm going to just pass for right now. This is my first day here, and I'm really...
Well,
can you hear me okay?
Thanks for joining us. You're hearing a little bit about we hear you great. Oh, you have your new headphones. You're happy with them? Great.
I am. I'm excited to be able to join everybody now. Yes.
Excellent.
So I'm excited to be a member here.
Well, we're excited to have you. Beth is a long-time Musar student, so she's a woman of great wisdom and experience. Ron and Leanna, you guys there?
We switched. I changed to a different device. So when I was changing, I looked around my room here and I counted, we have 16 Bibles. And the latest. So we both have sort of advanced degrees in theology and biblical studies. So we know quite a lot about these books. But the Leviticus, I have to say, I said, let's just skim over that one because it doesn't follow the narrative very neatly. And I like the narrative book. I think because people got lost when they lost their story. So I always clung to the narrative books. So, but what I have learned from this is that I did myself a disservice, because this book really teaches people how, very specifically and rigorously to live as community. And that's what's wrong right now in our world, is that we do not know how to live as community, and rules are arbitrary and changeable and, not immutable like this. And so I learned that it's very important. It might be one of the most important books we ever read and pass on to our children, is that there are rules, and rules need to be followed, or we have this anarchy that we're experiencing right now. So I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to Genesis.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like you're going to have a whole lot to contribute to our Genesis conversation.
Yeah.
So that would be great. And it's interesting what you say. Traditionally, children's education began with Leviticus.
Oh, nice. That makes sense.
Yeah. John, you were going to add?
Yeah, I was struck by the concept. I think somewhere in one of the prophets we're told to be holy as our Creator is holy.
Yes.
And so holiness has always been kind of a nebulous idea at best when I was growing up. And this is grounded. It tells you, you want to be holy? Do this stuff, and you could be holy. So even though the stuff that it tells you to do has changed over time, it's still, the idea is that holiness is to act correctly on earth. You're supposed to act correctly and justly, and that's how you be holy.
Right. And, we spent so much time in chapter 19, the so-called holiness code. And for those of you who are joining us late, you might want to go back. If you're going to read nothing else, read chapter 19, the holiness code, which every single one of those little tiny halachot in chapter 19 is so meaningful about how we live our day-to-day lives and bring holiness to our lives. And I love that you said that, John. In the thinking stages of my Rosh Hashanah sermon, and it's going to be based on this book, This I Believe, which is a compendium of the essays from the NPR series, This I Believe. And, just to give away the ending of what my sermon is going to be, when all is said and done, if I have to write my This I Believe statement, which I will do for this sermon, it's going to be, I believe in holiness.
Very good.
Cool.
So there you go. That's a preview of coming attractions. Now I just have to write it. So Mom, Sandy Koppell, we started off today, we had a long conversation about names. So I gave away that your name is not Sandy or Sandra, but A. So that everybody who was signed on early knows that you are A, Sandra. But are you there? It's hard to see you.
Yes.
I see her.
You're all in shadow. So how much did you love Leviticus, Mom?
How much did I love Leviticus? It's still not my favorite book. My favorite book that I'm really looking forward to getting to Genesis.
Uh-huh.
Because Leviticus was like a little bit too esoteric for me, but I'm new here, and I'm amazed at how learned all you people are, and I'm very impressed by this group, and I'm glad I can join from a distance. It reminds me in my synagogue, because of COVID, we are Zooming, and all of a sudden, our Candace parents are there from Israel.
Uh-huh.
So I feel now I get a bonus. I'm here from New York.
Uh-huh. Well, we're glad to have you.
We get a bonus that you're here from New York too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sherry Drew, you're also a little bit of a newcomer, but what's this experience been like for you?
But I've missed more, I think, than I've been here. But the parts I've been here for, I love. And so because of that, I bought the Jewish Study Bible.
Uh-huh.
And I think I learned more in the first few pages of that than I had ever really known. So I've loved it because of all of the thoughts you bring in and what everybody else contributes.
Nice. Well, we'll hope to see you in for Genesis beginning on the 23rd of August. Becca Hornstein, one of the original stalwarts.
Stalwart, that's me. Everybody looks at me and says, now there's a stalwart woman. A couple of small things. First of all, you've all made my little heart go pitter patter by the number of times the word community was uttered. And so I feel like I've just had, all this fibrillation. It's wonderful. Another thing is that I'm intrigued and would love to know why, somebody else brought this up, it might have been Terry, about why is Leviticus smack in the middle of these 5 books of Moses. It's sort of as if, we have this lovely narration going on, as if it's a TV miniseries. We get past 2 books and there's this message. And now we pause for a message from our sponsor. And we get all these laws. So I would love to know why specifically it was placed in the middle of the book. Of course, I agree. Owen always says what I'm thinking. And so I agree with all the concepts about creating laws so that we can build a community and bind a community together. And I think that it would be an intriguing exercise to look at something, even if it's just the holiness code, which seems to be maybe the thing we can wrap our arms around and relate to in the easiest way, is to have different groups of people look at that and say, not how do you apply this to how we live today, but if you were given the challenge of writing the holiness code in 2020, what would you be writing about? I think that would be a fascinating exercise.
Yeah, that's awesome. And would you do that, Becca, with reference to the text or ex nihilo?
Well, I think that it depends. I mean, I could see, this is the old teacher in me talking, I could see doing it with different age groups. Wouldn't this be interesting with bar and bat mitzvah kids, and then maybe with some young adults, and then maybe with some altakakers like us, whatever groups. But to start with just the sort of basic statement about what the holiness code is supposed to achieve and have people write that. And because so many people haven't read Leviticus, then to say, now that you've written what you think, thank you. There's my other teacher, yes.
That's right.
But am I right, Terry? Wouldn't it be fascinating?
I was right on with you. I was going to do it as a pre and post, to write it, keep it, study it, and then come back and write it again. And
there you go.
All right, well, anytime the 2 of you want to collaborate, I'm not kidding, on actually doing that, I'm here to support you. That would be amazing. Kat and Michelle, how are you guys doing there?
We're good.
I'm just impressed and touched that you have persevered through Leviticus with us. It is not the easiest thing.
It's not, and like, especially coming from the background that we have, I know I don't know so much for her, but I know for me, hearing all of this in this context and actually getting some of the underlying context about how the community operates and whatnot, it's kind of eye-opening in a way, because when we learned about Leviticus when I was a kid, this was all very glossed over, and all we ever really focused on, was the section with the holiness code, and with a lot of emphasis on, the clobber verses in a lot of cases, like, don't do these things. So it's nice to kind of have some legitimate context, and even kind of understanding all the minutia behind quite a bit of it. Like, I didn't know anything about the temple, or how you were supposed to give pledge to the temple to help keep things in operation. We were never taught any of the context behind that, so it's really kind of neat to learn about that and understand it a little bit more.
Nice.
I like the stuff about being fair to each other, and like
About being what together? I missed what you said.
like fair to each other, and
Fair.
not being jerks to each other.
Yeah. Don't be jerks. The rest is detail. Now go and study. Agreed. Matthew Newman, I think you get the last word. Is there anyone else we have not heard from?
Yeah, I just want to echo Roz and Sherry and the other newbies, because I think we all felt very welcome to a very special community with many diverse and strong views and personalities. And kind of regret not doing this earlier, but one good thing about COVID-19 and Zoom is you can do things that you were just too lazy to do. And don't know where we go in the future, when we become live, whether we get there or not, but there's a commitment to move forward. And it's a very strange blessing that we are learning more in a better and different way from many, many views that we may not have shared otherwise. That's my takeaway from this after 6 weeks.
I'm just making a note of what you said here. So that's a perfect segue, actually, Matthew. So I will just say for me, it's been a tremendous challenge, as it always is. You know, this is a, pretty knowledgeable group, and to find ways to shed light on the text, to take us deeper, to make us think about it in different ways. It's a great challenge for me as a teacher and a lot of fun. And I enjoy the fact that people are committed to participate and to have the conversation and to come back week after week and delve into the text in this way. And that's why I've posted a few times for those who came late, and Robin also has it for our historic URL if you want to start looking ahead at those Genesis texts. And I think they are in the order that we're going to approach them. So they're all there for you. You can get started with those. And then again, segueing from what Matthew said. Yeah, Lisa?
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Rabbi, for your dedication and commitment. Thank you. It's an absolute joy to learn, with you as our guide. Thank you.
Great.
This is you're amazing and a fabulous teacher.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Matthew was talking about the blessing, the silver lining of COVID, one of them as creating this opportunity. So another high holiday initiative coming your way is I have been talking a lot about what I call Torah from COVID, takeaways from this quarantine experience. And my intention is during the month of Elul to reach out to all of the various groups, the Musar groups, the Torah study group, the Adult B'nai Mitzvah, the Caring Community, and to create a Zoom opportunity with each of those groups. So some of you may get multiple invitations to that, but if you would at least participate in one of them, that would be great. And what I'd like to do in those sessions is share some of my Torah from COVID. What do I think I personally and we as a community have learned, taken away from the challenges of this time that we've been. And during the high holidays this year, everything is going to be virtually everything is going to be on a virtual platform. And in between services, we're going to have various presentations. Don't tell Rabbi Chernow about this, but I think about them as commercial breaks. But there are going to be like some commercial breaks or space in between the teen service and the family service, whatever it is. And we plan to broadcast various pre-recorded presentations. And my goal is for one of those to be a collection of the Torah from COVID. So that's the goal. So it will be both a conversation for us to have to filter and reflect on what we've taken away from this period, but also something that then we can all share with the broader community through a rolling presentation that will be broadcast during the holidays. And I'm imagining it to be anonymous, so your name won't be connected to a particular teaching, but to accumulate all of our collected wisdom from this experience and then share it more broadly in that way. So I saw a hand. Yes, Terry.
I wanted to comment. Friday night was the best Zoom service. That was the best streaming service that I've seen in a long time. And we stayed through to the end, and I said, Joe and I were both watching, and I said, it's the presence of people, which is what I miss. I told somebody, I'm dying to go to temple. I'm even dying to see the people I don't want to see.
Most important.
But I just want to be, and that was the feeling of that service when you brought everybody in. And I think that's something that we could do more often, even when it's not a specific, I know that was the caring committee, but the presence of people that you were with made it feel different.
Nice.
Well, and I thank you for that. It was a beautiful service.
Thank you. I would encourage you to share that feedback with Debbie Blinn and Rabbi Chernow.
I would be happy to.
So I'm looking at the time. It's 10:54. I think I told you I have Musar 11. Any last final comments? Yes, Sarah Lee.
You know, Moses gave us the laws, and I really think of Moses as Charlton Heston. And I think some of the wonderful things that when we grew up, the movies were, every once in a while we'd get a good biblical movie that made things alive for us. And I think our kids miss it today. Give a picture of somebody and it makes it more personal.
All right, good.
There's
So
too much out there.
Oseh Shalom Bimra, Booyah.
Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, Amen.